Jan 6th Trump legal scholar expert Julie Kelly is with us now. All right, Julie, I got you right out of the gate. You, in the immediate aftermath of the Supreme Court taking the presidential immunity case, said that you believe this basically dooms the Jan 6th case to be able to occur before the election. I want to ask you about this. In particular, you cited that Judge Chutkan has said, hey, when we restart the calendar here, the clock, there's going to be 90 days where both sides get to prepare themselves. Question for you. Why would Judge Chutkan not toss the 90 days and say, well, because this took longer than I anticipated, now I'm putting it on an even more accelerated schedule, and we're going to start this case in August and try to get it done right in the heart of the election season? Just wondering, how would you assess the timeline in general and what she might do with that 90 days, which I think you've written about is very significant?
I mean, that's a good question. I wouldn't put anything past Judge Chutkan, an Obama appointee who is, of course, desperate to get this case to trial as well. But she has stated in a motion that she will make sure that Donald Trump and the government both have 7 months to prepare for trial. Well, when she put a hold on her own immunity order denying Donald Trump immunity from criminal prosecution, when she handed that down in early December, a week or so later, she put an automatic hold pending the immunity appeal. And that really went through March 4th, the original trial date that has now been vacated. So that's really where the 3 months come from. Well, those 3 months between the middle of December and up to March 4th, that's where all the juicy stuff takes place, right? That's where jury selection happens. That's where they're filing in limine motions, meaning kind of laying out what they're going to present as arguments on both sides, witness lists, exhibit lists. So this takes a lot of time and a lot of back and forth and a lot of decision making by the judge, by the way. So it would be hard to see how she could really accelerate that process. Maybe she could shave off a week or two. But even so, as we said, if the Supreme Court comes back at the end of May, which would be the soonest, I believe, and upholds the lower court rulings that deny Donald Trump immunity from prosecution, and you add the 3 months, then that puts the trial at the soonest or earliest, whatever word is correct, the end of August. So, yes, Judge Chutkan could kind of play a few games, but since she would be fighting her own words that she put in motion, it would be tough to do.
So, Julie, thank you for being here. This whole thing is just getting so crazy. I wonder if you start to have like pieces of paper all over your walls or something like Nash in A Beautiful Mind, just to keep track of all the trials, because this has gone completely off the rails. There's so many trials, so many motions, so many things happening,
Right.
and you're still following the J6 defendants very closely, as you have been all
Mhm.
along. And as Clay and I were discussing in the last hour, one of these Supreme Court rulings will very much affect how not only that pertains to Trump, but January 6th as well. So a lot of interconnected pieces here. At this point, what are the chances in your mind that there actually is any trial that happens, federal trial that happens of Trump before the election, that it even starts?
Well, to your point, and I had two computers open yesterday. I was working on an article previewing the hearing that's scheduled tomorrow, where I will be in Southern Florida in the courtroom of Judge Aileen Cannon. She, of course, is overseeing the classified documents case, and this is getting really interesting because Jack Smith and Trump's lawyer and his two co-defendants are going back and forth about what information should remain under seal. Of course, Jack Smith wanting to keep most of the discovery evidence under seal, and Donald Trump and his co-defendants wanting certain things unredacted and put on the public docket. So I'm working on this knee deep in all of these motions, and all of a sudden my phone starts pinging with the decision by the Supreme Court. So I kind of pivoted to that. Luckily, I know that, like the back of my hand, the whole timeline. So posted an article on Declassified with Julie Kelly if people really want to know the timeline there. So it's getting slimmer and slimmer chance that the DC trial will take place. And that is why, Clay Buck, you see the outrage on the left, MSNBC, CNN. They knew that Donald Trump would be swiftly convicted in Washington, D.C. on 4 very vague counts by a jury made up of 92% of residents who voted for Joe Biden. The Department of Justice has a 100% conviction rate. In January 6 trials, now 2 years of trials, more than 100 trials, not a single January 6 defendant has walked out of a DC courtroom fully acquitted by a jury. Now they've acquitted some counts, but not one single January 6 defendant. Are you telling me that Donald Trump would be the first one? Of course not. So that's what they're so upset about. This would be an easy conviction that they could use against Donald Trump, pull voters away from him, as polls show. Now, the flip side, and I can get back to you guys tomorrow too, or whenever, I will be in the courthouse. I will be reporting on Twitter live. What happens there? What happens if Judge Cannon comes back and says, okay, we're settling a lot of these litigation matters, etc. I'm going to set the trial that was now for May 20th. I'm going to push that off till July. You are going to see the quickest case of whiplash that you've ever seen, because the same people now caterwauling about the fact that there won't be a DC trial, all of a sudden you're going to see a different tone because they don't want the classified documents case to go to trial. It is the weakest of the two. It will be the toughest for DOJ to prove in a jurisdiction that is far more friendlier to Donald Trump than Washington, D.C., and a judge who has been very tough on DOJ, not acting as the rubber stamp like Judge Chutkan. So it would be fascinating to see the reaction from these very same people if Judge Cannon sets a new trial date, certainly not tomorrow, but within the next few weeks.
Okay, so as you see it, you've been great on this. You've been coming on with us for a couple of years, laying all this out. You would, if you were betting right now, Julie, bet only on the Alvin Bragg case, that is the New York City misdemeanor elevated to a felony bookkeeping and business charges, as the only one that is going to go to trial and have any kind of result before Election Day itself.
I mean, that's certainly what it looks like right now. Not only what's happening in DOJ in the two, but certainly what's happening in Fulton County, where I really think most people thought that would be the easiest win. And that, of course, is falling apart amid all the scandal and what's happening with Fani Willis and Nathan Wade and the entire cabal that she put together. So it could be that Alvin Bragg gets the first bite of the apple, which, of course, no one wanted. The DC trial was supposed to start this Monday. I mean, think of what Washington, D.C. was supposed to look like. I mean, overpopulated, overrun with journalists from around the country and around the world, preparing for this history-making trial. And instead now, we've got a hearing tomorrow, which will be interesting, but now they're stuck with the Alvin Bragg prosecution. So this was not what Democrats, Never Trump Republicans, and certainly the corporate media had in mind when they were looking at 2024 and Donald Trump's legal problems.
Speaking of Julie Kelly, her Substack is declassified if you want a weekly update and deep dive into all of these matters. Julie, I know you're not somebody who gets far ahead of what has already happened, right? We're not in the prediction business, but and we're also not in the mind reading business. From what you can see, though, based on the realities of the judicial mechanisms at play here for the various cases, do you think the Democrats, notably Jack Smith and others, are feeling not just heat, but a bit of panic at how the schedules here are likely to play out? Or is there something that we're missing? I keep looking for the thing that's going to hit us that we don't see yet.
Right. No, I think that's a very good question. So we can't trust the system. We can't certainly trust DOJ or even most of these judges. So I think that's a really good question. Well, what could jump out next? What could happen? I'm not really sure with Jack Smith, and you're starting to see some criticism of Jack Smith and Merrick Garland for waiting until August of 2023 to bring the J6 indictment. Certainly the indictment in classified documents was June, and then a superseding indictment in July of 2023. Knowing that all of these unprecedented matters were going to have to be hashed out and ultimately resolved at the Supreme Court. So I don't know what he does next. Does he bring a superseding indictment? Can he? I'm not sure that he can with the proceedings on hold in Washington. Look, there's rumblings, and this is in the court motions, that there was a third FBI investigation into Donald Trump. We don't know what that was about. But Jack Smith has asked in the classified documents case to keep the details and the name of that FBI investigation under seal. Judge Cannon has said no, because to my knowledge, the investigation's over and we need to publish that information. The public has a right to know. So is there another investigation we still don't know about? So look, this is always filled with surprises, as you've noted. So is there something else on the horizon? Will they go to any extreme to salvage these cases? Absolutely. Will Judge Chutkan go along with it? Absolutely. So to your point, it's hard to predict, but the only prediction is you can't predict what's going to happen because every day is something new.
Last question for you, Julie, because the way you lay this out, I'm now looking at if Alvin Bragg is the only guy who gets to bring a case. I'm wondering if they're just going to go absolutely bonkers on that case and try to put Trump in jail or in prison because they know there's not any federal or Atlanta case that is going to come next. And so in the same way that they've hit him with a $450 million fine and $88 million or whatever it is in E. Jean Carroll, why do we think they're not going to try to put him in prison on this ridiculous bookkeeping charge that they've brought? To me, that would be the sign of desperation. Just do the absolute maximum that you could to him there to try to get the pound of flesh.
They definitely could. But look, that is not going to satisfy the Democrats. They wanted the January 6th conviction. They wanted the insurrection narrative with a judicial and a jury imprimatur on it, because we see all of the mileage that they're getting out of the alleged insurrection, even though Donald Trump is not charged with insurrection for January 6th in the indictment. And half of those counts, to your point, are at risk by the Supreme Court in the 1512C2 obstruction of an official proceeding case that the Supreme Court is now reviewing. They wanted the alleged insurrection conviction, because not only could they use that against Trump, that he cannot hold office regardless of what happens in the Colorado Supreme Court case, which will be reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court. They wanted to use that against any Republican involved in the events of January 6th, attempting to vet the results of the Electoral College. Anyone who signed up, senator or House member, who is going to challenge those votes on January 6th, they want to apply that insurrection label to them. They've already tried to. But if he had a conviction in Washington, they would have much more leverage to do so. And I think that is part of their pain. If you could get in conviction, some jail time with Alvin Bragg, okay. But it doesn't support their overall narrative that they've had since January 6th, more than three years now, that Donald Trump, his associates, supportive members of Congress, and certainly his voters are all terrorists who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th to keep Donald Trump in power.
Julie, keep up the fantastic work. I'm sure we'll talk to you again, because who knows what's next. But man, it's going to be interesting.
I have a feeling there will be Trump legal news between now and the election, so we will be discussing with Julie. Julie, thanks so much. Check out Declassified on Substack, everyone. That's how you can support Julie's work and stay very up to speed on all this.